everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Design Cinema. This is Feng Zhu speaking, and we're finally at episode 91. After a long delay, I'm happy to be back recording, making new episodes, and hopefully you guys enjoy the content I'll be producing, hopefully at a much faster pace, because I'm going to change the way I'm doing these episodes, which is to try to keep each one a little bit shorter than the previous 2 to 3 hour long episodes, because those not only took a long time to record, they also take a long time to render and to upload. Basically everything just gets increased in terms of time. So if I shorten these, hopefully I can make more of them. And also it's the end of the year, my projects are slowing down a bit, usually towards the end, so I'll try to make more episodes as time goes. And also I want to focus more on some of the more basic fundamental type of content. This is really meant for students and those learning at home to know a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes to those big production paintings and so forth. So at least you know some basic rules going in, and therefore you could try for yourself. And I also want to break down things that seems difficult. For example, perspective. You hear these terms like, oh no, I don't want to learn perspective. It's way too hard. It's way too tricky. But let me try to break it down so it's a little bit easier to absorb. So maybe you fall more interested, you get more interested in the subject matter and try to spend the time to learn it. And that's what today, episode 91, is going to be. Let's see what time it is right now. Okay, my afternoon is about 2:40. So let's see how long this runs. I don't know, maybe half an hour, maybe to an hour at most. I'm going to try to keep these short. Okay, let's jump right in. So today I'm going to cover perspective, okay, camera perspective. Okay, the first thing is, why is it important to know perspective? Okay, even the most basic stuff. And that leads to immediate to the second point here, which is guessing versus knowing. Okay, you can always guess, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some designers or artists guess really well with their eyes, and usually because they've done it so long, they use experience to make up for the guessing. So they might not even know exactly how perspective works in terms of visual vanishing points and all that kind of stuff, but they just guess really correctly by eye. But guessing is a very hard way to learn because you're depending purely on muscle memory and time. So if you do it for 10 years, you're probably better than your first year. But if you know how things work, you can actually be very proficient at it at year one, maybe even 2-3 weeks in. You know that, right? We've seen that evidence from our students at the school, in which they're only enrolled for, say, 2 months, maybe less. They're already producing very accurate drawings that doesn't have student mistakes. Now that's the core difference. And today I'll show a little bit of what that is. Okay. Then that leads to lens perspective and focal distance and FOV. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about how that works, and finally how to apply that to concept art. Today is just an introduction episode. We're going to do episode 92, in which we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that using some actual examples. Okay, so let's jump right in. Okay, guessing versus knowing. So I'm going to open up 2 images here. Okay, so these I got from the internet, purely as examples. They look like typical environment concept art that we do in terms of the subject matter and the camera angle and so forth, right? Pretty typical, some kind of environment. Here's a church with some tall buildings, right? However, this one has a very interesting camera on it that if you don't know how perspective works, you might not be aware of it. So what happens is, usually when we have a scene like this and you have to apply an object into it, this is where students make the most mistake, and this is called foreshortening mistake, which is the distance of object, or the size of an object as it shrinks in size when it goes away from camera. Okay, that's the easiest way to explain it. That's kind of like what foreshortening means. Kind of like a railroad track, it goes into distance. In this case, the cars, the buildings, the people, they're all shrinking in size as they go away from camera, from where the cameraman is standing, right? And let's take a look here. So there's a lady way back here, right? Walking over here. Let's highlight. Let's copy and paste. Okay. So it's that big. This person is about half a block, maybe just one building, just basically the length of this church from the people are here in front. But watch how small her size becomes even in this short distance due to perspective. Ready? I'm gonna move her over here. Okay, so this person is about the size of these people's knees. That's how high it gets, right? Even though we're talking about a very short distance in the real world, but on camera, this person has shrunk about 1/4 in size. Dramatic shift in distance. Same thing happens even with people that are just a few feet away, like this person walking here. Let's copy paste and let's put it to the people in the front. They have shrunken almost 50%, right? About 1/3 shrunk, okay, or 1/3. Yeah, it's about right? We lost about this much distance here, even though this is just a few feet away. So why is this happening? This is because of the camera, and we'll talk. That's what's going to lead into our later talk today, how camera changes perspective. Okay, but let's look at one more example here of this city. These still have watermarks on them because I just got them off the net, but they're good examples of your typical concept shot. So here is this looks like Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. I think it is. Looks like it. Anyways, here's a bunch of cars on the road, right? So let's look at this white car back here. Okay, just about 4 to 5 car length back. Okay, not that far from this taxi, but how much has it shrunk in size, in perspective? Let's look. Ready? It's like the size of a tire. Look at this. Okay, if you're only to look at this photo here, you think this car is way in the background, right? There's no way it's only 5 cars behind this taxi. Look at it, it's just right there, right? But look, it's almost like an optical illusion. It's like that is really far away, but no, it's right there. It's the same car, same car. Okay, so why is this happening? This is happening, which I talked about in a previous episode dealing with cameras. But let's say if I'm repeating myself, don't worry about it because I forgot what I recorded anyways. But anyways, this is happening because generally when students are guessing, they're guessing using the human eye because we're all humans. So they're guessing with something like a 50mm lens, which is equivalent to somewhat of a human eyeball. So we don't see the world like this. We don't see the world like this, in which a car that's only a few feet away has shrunken in this much distance. We think like this. Okay, let's take this taxi. You go, okay, student, put this taxi 4 cars behind using this perspective. But they don't know perspective. They're like, oh, okay, here's a city. How would I guess this? Let me just do this by eyeball. Okay, so I'll guess it's 4 or 5 cars back. It's got to be like something like this, right? That's about right. That looks about right. Okay, let's just put it right here. Okay, and you might even look at this if you disregard the perspective in the background. You might like, that looks about right. But look how off this is. This car is like a giant car if it was actually here in real perspective, right? Even if I shrunk it down to here, look about here. You're like, that looks pretty good. Look, watch this. Okay, let's just disregard the background and just look at these 2 cars. Like, that looks pretty all right. There's nothing wrong with that. But look at the difference here. This car is like 4 or 5 times bigger than this white car at about the same distance, okay? And this is because we're guessing with a human eye. And you see this a lot with bad photo bashing. You see this with perspective drawings in which a student is doing by eye and not calculating. And they make mistakes like this. And mistakes like this are very hard to correct because they're hard coded essentially into the image. So unless you spend a lot of time trying to correct it, might as well start over because it's probably faster to do it from scratch and try to correct mistakes like this. And trust me, I've been teaching for a long time. And when I come across work like this, all I gotta do, the only thing you can do to the students is like, look, you made a huge mistake. You're miscalculating the camera. You guessed it. And there's really no way to fix this if you want it to look nice. So that's what's happening with guessing versus knowing. So even if you know a tiny bit of perspective, you can avoid this problem. But first, let's get to knowing what perspective is about. Okay, so let me open some examples here. Keeping track of my time here. It's been a long time since I recorded, so hopefully I'm not rushing here. I'll try to slow myself down. Let's drink some water first of all. Okay, let's open up the camera and the eyeball. Whoops, what? Windows 10. Okay. Boing, boing. Okay, so I got 2 shots here, one of a camera, one of an eyeball. Essentially, they're the same thing. And why is this important? Because this is how we view most of the products that we make. Okay, so either you're working on video games, films, that's pretty much the 2 primary sources, I guess. You're looking at through some kind of lens. Okay, in the real world, you're looking through an eyeball, and if you're looking on a film, you're working off of a camera. And if you're doing, say, video games in 3D video games, there's going to be some kind of virtual camera contain the code that's essentially the same as a real world camera. So what's the common factor here? The common factor here is the lens. Human eye is right there. The camera's got this main lens and it's got all this kind of glass, but they work pretty much the same, which is taking the world, the light coming in, and changing that into some kind of thing that we can understand. For us, the neural optic nerve translate those lights into images, and the camera puts it onto a sensor, right? Records all the RGB colors and so forth, and all the light exposures. But they work the same way. So why is this important for us to know? Learning perspective, all the boxes and stuff. What does this have to do with perspective? Well, what happens is we have to know what the lens is doing. So let's open up another image. Here is a sphere. Okay, let me just shrink these guys down. So we'll put them on the side here. Okay, let's put these on the side here. Pardon my I'm not gonna edit these down. I like the raw format of Design Cinema, which is everything. Whatever you see, it's the way it is. I don't try to cut anything out, like my voice. You know how they cut the white spaces out of audio? So anyways, I don't have time for that, so let's just be the way it is. Okay, so here is a sphere. So imagine we're looking at the world through a camera that has a very wide angle lens. And don't worry, we can get to that in a bit about lenses. But we're looking at the front view of a lens or an eyeball, and the world is completely distorted. We're seeing a 360 degree, or maybe in this case, like almost a 180 degree view of the world, okay? Heavily distorted because it's a sphere. But watch what happens as I start zooming in. Okay, look, near, it's like the Matrix. Near, and watch, the world becomes normal, okay? These grids that you've seen that was distorted earlier now looks parallel to the edge of the screen. Nothing looks distorted. But if I zoom out, you can see this distortion effect come back. Wow. Right? It's pretty cool. It's like, right? And that's exactly what perspective is, okay? Which is how do objects basically behave in the 3D space under a lens condition. And just by changing the FOV and the focal distance of a lens, I could get different type of perspective. And this is what's happening in those camera shots, okay? So let's dig a little bit deeper into that and talk about the where are we now? We're talking about this, right? We're talking about the focal distance and FOV. So what does that actually mean? Okay, let's look at this. Let me draw some lines on top of this. Boink, boink, boink. Now imagine this is a perspective grid, and I'm gonna place vanishing point 1 here, VP1. I'm gonna put VP2. Let's make this full screen. VP3. VP4 and VP5. Okay, in a scenario like this, these vanishing points, the object gonna go and curve towards them. So if I was to draw an object here using these vanishing points, I would get a box that's shaped something like this. Okay, a very distorted object due to the curvature of the lens. Okay, something like that. Now if I draw an outside one here, it'll look like this. Now what's happening here is I'm only drawing a single object, so nothing looks that distorted other than the lines being curved. But if I was to draw this object again inside here, watch how quickly it shrinks in size. Okay, even if I don't draw this super accurate. Okay, let's draw one right here. The next one is about something like this. Okay, the one over here is going to be near. Okay, and this is what's happening in that city street in which the person is shrinking really quickly. Okay, it's because we're using a very, very distorted lens. But you can think of perspective like this. But how do we make these images not distort and not change form so fast? Well, we do this. Okay, now those vanishing points are still there if you think of it this way. Okay, they're still here. This is VP2, this is VP1. Let's just do this way, VP1, VP2. Okay, doesn't really matter, same thing. Okay, here's a horizon. Now, if those lines are that far away, then look at these lines here. They're almost parallel to the page. So perspective essentially is starting to disappear. Okay, so objects that's happening this close in a sphere exactly is now losing its perspective. So now let's open up some focal distances to explain how this works. Okay, so let's go back to the lens. Hopefully you guys are following along here. This will all make sense once we start applying this to some concept drawings, because right now it's just very basic understanding. I'm kind of taking photography, these type of things you can find on the internet. There's a ton of photography stuff, but I'm trying to apply that so we can understand it under a concept in the concept world. Okay, so I'm gonna draw a lens like this. I'm gonna draw a lens like this. What time is it? Okay, we're still doing pretty good here. Okay, so let's call this a 15mm lens. Let's call this a 200mm lens. Let me write a little bit better here. Okay, 200mm. Yeah, which has a very flat lens. So what's happening here is light's coming in, and it is coming into the lens. Check out what happens. Okay, the 15mm lens, because of short focal distance, can actually quote unquote see the world more. It has a wider field of view because the focal distance is shorter. The 200mm lens has a much longer field of view. I mean, not field of view, length of focus, right? Therefore, its field of view is much, much smaller. Okay, so hold on a second. This will make sense in a second. Okay, so let's open up our sphere here. what's happening is under a 15mm lens, okay, we're seeing a lot of the world. Essentially very similar to this sphere. So it's seeing probably a 15 in here on a camera is like something like this. Okay, like a GoPro with a very wide angle lens. Okay, it's seeing something like this. Okay, so if you zoom in, you can see much more of the world, almost 180-degree view, or maybe 150-degree or so. I'm not exactly sure what a GoPro field of view is, but it's pretty wide. Okay, so you can see quite a bit. What happens is a 200mm has a much narrower field of view. It's seeing less of the world. So a 200 in this shot is probably right around here, I imagine. Okay. Now, how does that change perspective? Well, we just talked about that earlier. Check it out. When we have this, whoa, shrunk it way too much here. Okay. When we have this much wide, we're looking at the 15 out here. Okay, 15 mil. Here we're looking at the 200. Check it out. The 15 has all this perspective range to play with, but it also distorts the image extremely quick. On a 200, you have almost no perspective because the vanishing points are so far apart. There's essentially no perspective left. Okay, so now quickly though, I want to mention this with FOV because some of focal distance and FOV are related, but the numbers are kind of reversed. So gotta keep that in mind. Let me open an image here to demonstrate that. I think it's this one here. Okay, the easy way to remember this, again, this is something I found from the photography websites. The easy thing to remember, if the lens is wide, okay, if the lens is wide, say this is a 14 here, it has a big field of view, FOV. If the lens is long, okay, or long focal distance, say here's a 600, okay, that's the focal distance, then the field of view is very narrow. Just keep that in mind and you're good. Okay, so wide angle lenses, the smaller number, the bigger the field of view, the bigger the distortion. The flatter the lens, the longer the distance of the lens, the focal distance, the narrower the FOV. I'm hearing some strange sounds. I think someone's banging on the wall. Anyways, the longer the lens, the narrower the field of view. Let me see what that sound is. Okay, hopefully it stopped. I have no idea what the heck that was. It sounds like someone's banging on the outside wall or something. Anyways, okay, field of view. So how does that apply to the work we do? Well, let's open up a sample image again. Okay, and actually before I do that, let me see here if I want to open up one more shot here. Okay, let's open this. Okay, I have a perfect shot to demonstrate that. Okay, so, oh, actually, I know what I want to open. I want to open this thing here. Okay. So I know you guys play video games and that word FOV shows up all the time, okay, FOV. But FOV and focal distance are not exactly the same things here. Man, the banging sound is back. All right, let's hope it stops because I don't want to re-record this. I just started this and I want to like restart from the beginning. So let's hope this, whoever's doing that will stop it soon. Okay, anyways, back to this chart. So this is something I found on the Canon website. So it kind of illustrates what I mean here. So if you look at a typical video game for consoles, there's somewhere around like a 65 FOV. So you can see this is a field of view up here in this chart. Here's a, let's draw a line right here. Okay, 65. That actually equates to a something like a 28mm lens. So still pretty wide, but not that wide that it's gonna distort the image. So it's meant to be on console games. A lot of console first-person shooters, for example, use something like a 65 to a 70-degree FOV field of view. Okay, that gives you about a focal distance on a real lens about a 28 to a 30. So it sees enough of the world but doesn't distort. But that's why a lot of people get motion sickness when they play console games on a PC because the screen is much closer to the screen and it distorts the image, and the image doesn't look distorted, so it looks flat. What happens is a lot of PC games, okay, this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's helpful to know. They like to have the FOV somewhere between, say, 90 and 100. That gives you a crazy lens. Check it out. It gives you an 18 to a 15, which essentially is a fisheye lens. So if you're looking at these games, like someone playing a PC game with a high FOV, and you're watching on YouTube on a small window, you're like, that image is completely fisheye. How could you play like that? No, it doesn't work that way. What happens is you're always still focused on the middle of the screen. Everything else is distorted, but your eye doesn't take that into focus. I can illustrate that very easily with this shot here. Okay, some really good example I found in the net here. Someone took a shot of the iPhone 6 versus a GoPro. Okay, So this one has a very flat lens. I'm not sure what the iPhone in particular this shot was taken, but I'm guessing this looks almost like a 50 millimeter. Okay, so that's getting much even closer than 65 FOV. So if you come over to our chart here, a 50 mil is giving you a FOV of like 39. So it's unplayable. That's a video game. You throw up pretty quickly. But look at this. This is not natural either. This is not how we view the world in human eyes. It's too flat. Okay, and perspective is still there. You can see some perspective here, but it's not dramatic. Now let's look at this lens here. This is a GoPro super wide. So I'm guessing this is going down even beyond 15. This is probably something like an 8 or something. That's pretty distorted. Look at the side of the walls here. This person is completely distorting. Okay, look at the size of this guy standing here compared to the guy in the middle. Check it out. Let's copy and paste. Look at this, right? That's how much difference the two is, and that shows you the distortion effect of the lens here. Massive distortion. So this is, I'm guessing, about an 8 millimeter lens, or maybe even lower. So this will give you, let's just say this is let's just call it 10 for short. That equals a FOV of, let's check our chart here, right? 10, something like that, like 120 FOV, which is a little high for video games. So right now it looks distorted, but watch what happens if I just go here. Okay, about somewhere around here. This is about FOV of maybe 100. Okay, but thing is, you're looking, when you're playing the video games, you're actually focusing right about here. Everything else is peripheral vision. Okay, you don't focus on them too much. You focus on here. But look at the interesting fact here. This here is the same as this. Okay, you're looking at almost the same content, but this is where your eye is actually focusing. That's why it looks comfortable if you're playing a console type game with a high FOV on a computer screen. And the same will not work. You're playing this kind of FOV on a TV screen, on a sofa, it will look completely fish-eyed. Okay. Anyways, it's a little bit off topic, but this kind of explains the difference between low FOV and high FOV in terms of a real-world camera. Okay. So just keep this in mind. Let's repeat. Wide lenses with short focal distances give you big distorted field of view. Long lenses, long focal distance give you very narrow field of view. Okay. Now, let's check this out in a photograph, because it gets pretty cool here. Check this out. Okay, let me close all these dudes up. Keep that open. Okay, here's a shot of, looks like, is this New York? New York. Okay. Obviously, we have perspective going on. So today, I'm not going to review how perspective works. Let's just draw it in so you can see some basic of how perspective is working, right? These red lines are some of your vanishing points that's happening here. Okay, very easy to get from buildings. We have a horizon line right there. Okay. And we have another vanishing point kind of flat going across here. Okay, so that's what's happening here on this camera, on this shot. So you can see without the picture, that's kind of perspective grid. So this obviously has quite a bit of perspective. This also has a camera with maybe I'm guessing a 30 millimeter lens, 35, right? It's got enough distortion because the buildings shrink pretty fast as it goes in the distance, but not enough to be a fisheye. But the interesting thing here is this is the same thing as our little sphere. Let me open that up. Boing, where's my sphere? Okay. Remember this little trick I was doing earlier? This looks all distorted, and I zoom in and it kind of just gets flat. Well, I could do this with this photo, right? We have perspective right now, and watch what happens if I zoom in towards the back buildings. Perspective disappears. Perspective comes back. Perspective disappears. Perspective comes back. It's the same. So what we're doing is, I drew those red lines already on the sphere, right? This is my original photograph, giving me a certain kind of lens. I'm guessing here, I'm not sure what lens this photographer is using. Let's just say it's 35. Okay. But if I'm zooming into here, okay, on the same photograph, okay, which is again long focal distance, right? So I can see further, but no perspective. I'm gonna get something like this. Okay. This is probably even bigger than 200. It's going to be a 400 mil. Okay. So at this distance, perspective essentially is gone. Okay. No perspective left. No perspective left means it's much easier for us to actually draw this. Okay. Which we're going to get to a very quick demo after I talked about this, how this applies to the work we do. Okay. So no perspective means I could just copy and paste these buildings left and right. I don't have to worry about it because there's no perspective. It's flat. I cannot do that with this. Okay. So just check this out. I take this group of building here, just gonna copy and paste and just put it right here. Let me delete the sky. You can see how easy it is for me to mix in the background. Look, doink. I could paste that over here as well. Let's flip it. Okay. Let's put one over here, put one over there. Okay, look, you can't even tell that I pasted buildings. Why? Because no perspective to worry about. They're all flat. At that distance, no more perspective to consider, no more have to worry about vanishing points and all that, kind of just paste it in. So working on, for example, movies, and you want like a cheaper map painting, this is what you will do, because it's much faster to produce a map painting of something that's in the distance, shot with a very flat lens, no perspective. If it's fast for example, for a concept art to do it, well, it's the same speed when it applies to map paintings and VFX. If you want a very complex map painting, then you have perspective, because the same trick wouldn't work. I simply cannot take this building here and put it over here and make it work. You see, like, oh, I can't cheat, right? I can't even shrink it, right? Look, that doesn't work, even if I like reverse it or try to make the perspective kind of okay, because the distance is not right anymore. Your eye tells you this is fake because perspective is at play. Okay, so this is how it applies to the kind of work we do. Okay, let's look at a few more kind of fun examples here. Show you. Doink. Okay, let me show you a few really long shots, these flat cameras. Okay, what time is it right now? Okay, we're still doing good. All right, so these are all shot with a probably 200 plus lens, long focal distance, short FOV, gets rid of perspective. And what happens when perspective disappears? The shapes all kind of collapse together. Okay, where there's no more distance. Okay, let's use that New York shot as another example. Okay, you can see here, we can see a distance between the buildings very clearly between here and here. All right, we can kind of see, okay, that building is like 3 buildings away, this building is 4 buildings away, so forth. But the further we get, okay, let me get rid of my map paintings here, is now it's very, very hard to tell how far this building is from this building, or that tall building with this building. You just can't tell anymore, because no more perspective, therefore no more visual clues. But flat camera has a use. It creates these very epic shots because it gets rid of the distance. So these landscape shots I'm showing you here are using that trick, okay, by putting a 400 mil or 600 millimeter lens on here. This mountain with snow, who knows how far this is from the lens? This actually could be quite far away. It could be like a kilometer away, but you can't tell. No perspective, no way to tell, right? You could say, oh, this tree and this tree is about the same size, but with no perspective, how do you know this is actually further? This could be really close in the valley, or it could be really far away. And this is how you get those shots of like a giant moon in the sky. You've probably seen those photos of like a huge moon. They're doing that with the camera. Okay, you could put a person or a wolf in front of it, and the moon looks like it's humongous, and everybody's like, that's impossible, the moon cannot be that big. But of course you can pull that off. You have the right kind of lens under the right conditions. Okay, same thing happening here. No distance. Let's look over here, right? So if you look at this shot, beautiful shot here, there's a mountain in the background. Who knows how far this is from this? It's very, very hard to tell. In fact, it's very hard to tell between these two. Are these guys directly connected, or is this a very long valley between? Can't tell, okay, because of perspective or lack of perspective. Here's another shot here, right? So there's perspective here with the telephone pole. But exactly how far is this mountain, unless you really go in there and calculate the size of the trees, it's hard to tell. Because this also, I'm guessing, is shot with a very flat lens, something like a 200 mil. Okay. Again, you might be asking, okay, I sort of know this. I'm looking at pictures. How does this apply to what we do? Well, let me show you a quick example. Is that concept art, sometimes you can make things look really good, but actually the effect is very hard to achieve in camera. So let me show you, I found a screenshot of Far Cry 5. Okay, here's because I was looking at this shot, hey, it looks like the new Far Cry with the Montana and so forth. But notice, you can't get this epic shot. The reason for it is because the field of view or the focal distance is not correct. It's unplayable. If we use this as a gameplay camera, you get very dizzy, because we're going back to our chart here. If I still have it open, onto my chart, and closed it. Okay, you're talking about an FOV of like, now let's just look. Let's open our chart because it's quite interesting. If we're using a 200 millimeter lens, let's take a look here. Find it here. Check this out. It's a FOV of 10. So next time you're in a video game that lets you manually change FOV, try it. Put the FOV like at 10 or 20. It's unplayable because you're so zoomed in, essentially. Most people call it zoomed in. What happens is actually you have no more perspective. You have no more distance recognition. You'll probably throw up in a few minutes if you play a game at 10 FOV. But it creates really beautiful shots. Okay, most games are dealing with a much wider, right? Let's go back to 65, right? 28, we're dealing with 115. Okay, so if you look at a screenshot of Far Cry, okay, here it is. Okay, this has perspective in it. Look, New York. near horizon line, right? I won't go into details on how this perspective works. We'll do that next episode, but it's got perspective in it. This is probably a 65 FOV, which gives you about 28 millimeter lens, right? Still got mountains in the background, but it's not as epic as this shot here. To get this shot, you guys should know now, we could get that from this photograph by simply reducing the field of view and increasing the focal distance. Check it out. Ready? You want that epic shot we had earlier? Well, just do this. Boom. Same shot. Check it out. Now we have this huge mountain fit in the background. We still have towns and stuff. It looks pretty good. Unfortunately, you can't actually use this as a real world playing style if it's 3D and the players are able to move it. So in a film, we could achieve this because a film, we could lock the cameras. It's not controlled by the user. But in the video games, in a 3D world, we cannot achieve shots like this. It's just not possible unless you make the player play like a 10 FOV, which they'll throw up. So, but again, it doesn't have to do with much with us, but something to be aware of when you're doing concept art. If you want these epic stuff to show up on films, again, you could achieve it, but in terms of games, it's a little bit trickier to do. So, knowing that, how do you apply that? Where's my last one here? Doink. Okay, how do you apply that to concept art that we do? Well, you can use this to practice. Simply put, higher FOV and shorter or wider focal distance creates more perspective. Therefore, you have to know what you're doing. Okay, so if you're practicing on a shot like this, let's not use Far Cry. Let's use like the New York one here. Okay, where's my New York? Did I close it? Oh, it's back here. Okay, if you're practicing this shot here under a 35 mil lens or whatever this was, much hard to practice with because too much stuff to calculate, too many things you have to know, and that can be intimidating and pretty hard. Well, practice here. Okay, 200, 400 mil lens, no perspective. All you gotta do is just draw stuff. You're not even worried about it. And this is why you see so many kind of like on the concept art scene, especially professionals or even students, when we're kind of relaxing and just want to do something fun and practice, you tend to see a lot of spiky mountains, large towers, and these type of kind of contents because they're very fast to produce. When we're doing our day job, like my day job working on movies, we're dealing with sets and they have very accurate measurements. They're really boring most of the time and they're very accurate. So when taking time off and want to do something fun, the last thing we want to do is do these highly brain and calculated and high perspective things. We want to just relax. So that's why I see a lot of this kind of spiky mountains or towers and these kind of things because they're quite easy to produce. In fact, we could probably produce one really quickly before I end this episode. Let me close up some of these so the background doesn't get messy here. Let's leave that there. Actually, we don't need this no more. Close that as well. So we're dealing with the last one. How does it apply to concept art? So next episode, 92, we'll dive a little bit deeper by reverse engineering photographs to find the perspective and how that helps us, right? For this episode, we'll end it on a quick demo here, really quick one, to show you that if you do a flat lens design, you don't have to worry about perspective much at all. Okay, actually, I have some previous shots that I prepared that demonstrates this. Let me just show you here. I think it's in here. Same type of stuff as a Far Cry shot. As you can see here, these are all from photography websites. A 21 millimeter lens, very wide angle, tons of content, tons of distortion. Therefore, you have to be very careful and you have to know your stuff when dealing with shots like this. Versus, say, here's a 450. Look how little. 450, you've seen the top of the sign, the parking lot, and this van. That is about right here. Oop, let me go back to the 21. On the 21, it's right here. Okay, check it out. So that's is it 450? So the 450 only sees that much of the world. So we're talking about FOV of like 5 or something to that degree. We could refer to our chart. Boink, doink, doink. All right. So 450 doesn't even go that far. Okay, it goes somewhere around here, right? It's between, here's a 400. It's an FOV of 5, okay? So that's unplayable for a video game, but it looks nice. It depends on what you're trying to do. Where'd it go? Here it is. All right, so if you're doing a shot like this, it could look pretty nice, no perspective. And this is what we're actually gonna do our little quick demo on, is using something like a 200 or 400 mil lens. Easy to make concept art with, especially big environments. Very easy to do, but not exactly applicable in the real world in terms of using it in a video game. So again, films you can, because films could lock the screen like a big matte painting. We could achieve these epic effects, but a little hard to do in video games. So anyways, let's close that. Same thing happening here. Okay, this one's a little hard to tell because there's no, not that much human objects, But same thing, 18 mil, you see a lot of the environment, a lot of trees, a lot of grass and so forth. Look at this 200 mil, you just seen the ship, trash can, right? So that shot is essentially, you can't even see it. Here's a trash can right there. It's like this, near, okay, 200. Keep in mind, the photographer has not moved. They're standing in the same location. They just changed their lens. They're changing from a wide to a very flat. Okay. Before I do the quick demo, I think I have one more image prepared of the. Oh, I think it's in here. Boink. This one here. Okay. So you can see this one's actually from, I think, of a GoPro website or something. So they're using words like narrow and wide to sell their cameras because they don't want to get technical. So I actually don't know what the actual focal distance of a GoPro is. I think they have narrow, wide, and like super wide or something like that to sell their cameras. But anyways, this is kind of like a typical, probably, this is not even 65. I'm guessing this FOV will be like a 40 FOV. Okay. So it's kind of dizzying if you're playing a video game with this kind of field of view, but works fine for films. But this one, you can see it's distorted, but it's actually quite comfortable. This has a FOV, I'm guessing about 100 plus FOV, right? But it's pretty comfortable because you're focusing, again, the same area. See, same area. Okay, your eye looks here. This is your peripheral vision. So as you're playing a video game with this, it feels very comfortable, but only if you're playing on a PC close to your eye. On a console, on a TV, this will be really strange because it'll be fisheyed, okay? So, one more time, tip on concept art. You cannot mix two different cameras into one, okay? You have to know what you're doing. It's impossible to shoot a photograph with two lenses at the same time. So this is a photo bashing. Remember the taxi demo I was doing earlier? Let's open that up again as a reminder, okay? When someone does this and pastes a car from like a different shot into here, right? This just doesn't work simply because you cannot have this camera in this camera, okay? You have to find a card in the right kind of perspective to fit. This will work if I shrink it really small. It could kind of work, but not really. You can see it's about the same size because this car was taken with a wide angle lens and I'm putting it in essentially in a non-wide lens. You see here, the perspective is disappearing, right? But this car still has a lot of perspective in it. So therefore, it doesn't look right. See, if I zoom out here, even the size is correct, the perspective is not correct. So that's why it's a little bit complicated. And we'll dive into that in episode 92, 93, and so forth. But let's do our really quick demo here. How long have we been doing this? Half an hour? No idea. Okay. Let me do here. Bonk. Close. Let's close our little chart. Real quick demo. It's gonna look horrible. It's mostly to make a case of why it's easy to do like a environment painting or something without perspective. Okay, I'm just gonna lasso some stuff here. Let's do like a 10-minute, 5-minute demo. Okay, let's lasso another one. Let's do spiky towers or something of a tower near. Okay, check it out. I'm gonna like just copy and paste this guy. No perspective to worry about, so I could just make whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's copy and paste this guy again. Let's make like a huge one way in the back somewhere. Okay. Look, I'm doing this like really dumb stuff, but it'll work. Watch. Copy and paste this guy. So essentially, this is like a 400mm lens. Let's make this a little longer. Okay, size doesn't matter here. No perspectives. I could just put in essentially whatever I want to the shot. Oops, whatever I want to these shots. Doink. Okay, that. Let's make this full screen. Make it fill the screen here. Now let's paint on top of this a little bit just to get some sense of designing here. Okay, watch. Make it big. And very quickly we start to get like some stuff happening. Some other spiky things sticking out of the ground. Who knows what these things are? Alien planet, desert, Utah, you know, Arizona. But this painting, look how easy it is to start to get it started. Okay, simply because I've gotten rid of the heavy perspective stuff. There's still a horizon line and all that stuff here. It doesn't mean it's completely flat, but I flattened this so much in terms of a perspective that I don't have to worry about the nuances, the small perspective changes. Okay, I'll just worry about the big ones. Like for example, I'm gonna look up and see maybe some changes of the rock formations, but it's not something I have to pay huge attention to at this point. Okay, and very quickly I'm starting to get like Grand Canyon, you know, Utah, kind of, let's put a road in there, get some fake perspective in there. Okay, put another one in the distance. Look how fast this is to produce. Okay, I could not do this if I was doing that New York shot with a wide angle lens. I have to first calculate the vanishing points. I have to calculate all the grids and every building, make sure that there's a left and a right and a top. Right here, just painting away. So that's why you see a lot of this kind of stuff on the net, especially for practice type stuff. Because I do the same thing when I'm just kind of relaxing. I want to just paint something really quick. I do the same type of content, because why would I want to like torture myself when I'm trying to relax? Okay, we get enough of torturous work in our day jobs. So put some atmosphere in there. Let's make this full screen here. Okay, let's make everything. Let me put some clouds back there to add some white. I'll use a brush for that. Save some time. Okay, this is not a real demo. This is just a quick thing to show you guys how easy it is to produce things when you have no perspective. Okay, and next week, or not next week, next episode, hopefully it's actually next week. I don't know. I'll try to do something a little bit more complex, right? We'll reverse engineer some photographs and so forth, and try to get something more perspective. Okay, next episode, I think 92 is going to be reverse engineering perspective off of pictures. So you guys could start familiar yourself with how perspective works and not be locked to, like, every time you hear the word perspective, it's always like a cube, you know, in a grid or something. It's always very intimidating. You're like, I don't want to learn that stuff. It looks really boring. Hopefully by explaining this way, you could get it. You could start understanding how perspective works and be a little bit less afraid of it. Okay. So today's very intro. This stuff is very intro. Most of you guys, especially if you're a pro, you already know this anyways. So, but I just learned how focal distance and so forth on the lens affects your shot. Okay, look at this. This is like we're less than 3-4 minutes in, and we are producing some kind of scene. The only thing we're missing is a dude doing something, like riding on a horse, standing, looking, something like that, which you can add in pretty easily here. Here, let's put. Who knows what these are? Let's add some human objects. Remember all the 1, 2, 3 rules. So we'll put it like a little cactus in here. So no perspective on this stuff either. So it's pretty easy to do. Near. You could put it at whatever size. Near, completely eyeball. You see, I didn't use any grids. I didn't put any perspective lines on there except for maybe a horizon. Come on, let me select that. And I'm already producing content in a few minutes. But great practice though. When you're learning, the thing is you don't want to make things hard for yourself, right? You want to make things easy for yourself so you like what you're doing. So again, these episodes are tailored towards students. If you're a professional watching this, you're like, dude, this is so dumb. This is so simple. Well, I don't want to watch this episode. Well, the thing is, you know, this is not meant for pros. This is meant for those who are trying to learn. So when you're learning, do something that's easy, do something that you have control over, do something that you can like, you know, fall in love with, and therefore you're not frustrated by it. And we slowly increase difficulty versus, let me do a demo on like a very heavy perspective shot of a city in cyberpunk, blah, 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 right? Much too hard. Okay. Speaking of that, it's also, hopefully next week we'll cover that, which is you have to pick the right lens for the right type of content. So for a shot like this, in which we're doing like a Grand Canyon, Utah scenario, like Red Dead Redemption or something like that, right? It's shots like this is nice under 200mm lens. Okay, so we choose that. But if you're doing, say, a alleyway in a cyberpunk world, right, like a lot of shops and black market and cybernetic type stuff, right? You probably want to choose a wide angle lens to really compress the perspective, to really widen the shot, so you get quite a distortion happening, create that claustrophobic feel, right? So lenses play a big part in that, and to understand how lenses work, which we talked about today, will give you a better idea how to plan for these type of things, so you don't do it all by eyeball. Okay, so the only thing we're missing here, add a little dude. We could put it anywhere. Put on a horse. Put a guy. Our baddie lasso dude. And we're almost there. So when you're practicing, this is a great way to start, and we'll get more and more difficult, more trickier as we go forward here. Let me just do that. Down. Put a shadow on the guy. Right, you can put him anywhere, no perspective, so Let's put him right there. Make sure he reads, so we're gonna blow a little bit of atmosphere behind him. But see, shots like that, you can't actually do in a video game because we're using a flat lens, and we just talked about earlier, if you're playing the game, you can't get this shot. So the value will not look this big. Things will be much smaller because there's actually perspective involved. So, but when you're producing concept art and you want just like a nice scene to kind of capture the mood, then you could do these. But we don't use these quite a lot. Like right now, I only work on films. I don't work on games that much these days. So on films, we rarely get to do things like this because there's no need. Most directors want sets and want scenes. So we actually have to place a real camera in there. We can't use these wide angle 400 milliliter lens things because it doesn't look like the final shot. So director has no use for it. But for getting into concept art, well, this is a great way to practice. Right? Check it out. Like it's like what you call it, a 5-10 minute demo, and we already have something. The reason for it, no perspective. So again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. In 92, we'll go more in depth into this kind of stuff. And yeah, happy to be back. Love recording this. I'm kind of slouching my chair as I did this demo here. I'm gonna sit up here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in episode 92. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Write comments, questions in the comment section. And yeah, I'll see you guys in 92. This is Feng Zhu signing off. Bye-bye.